All right. So in this chapter, I don't remember if I started it last time or not. I don't think I did, although I might have, but I feel better starting it again. So basically in this chapter, what we're going to consider is interest. You know, the idea is if you're, let's say, opening up a savings account at a bank, you know, to hold your money, and you put money in the account. What the bank does usually is it'll calculate a small percentage of it, and then it'll add, you know, that percentage to the account. That's what interest is. If you're borrowing money from like a bank or some other lender for, say, school, you know, for like a loan or something, what will happen is there'll be some kind of, you know, they'll calculate a percentage of the amount they're lending out to you, and you'll have to calculate and you'll have to, pay back not only the original amount, but the percentage as well. That's the idea behind interest. You know, it's how banks make money when they lend out money, for instance. And really here, we're going to look at simple interest and compound interest. And really, there are different ways of calculating interest. And really, the chapter is showing you, not only it's showing you an example, an application with exponential functions. We're also looking at how math is used in the world around us. That's one of the big things about this course, is to see how math is used all around us. And we're going to see how with loans, accounts, things like that, how where interest is calculated, math is used there. There's also this other concept called the APY, the annual percentage yield. That's actually based on percent increase, you know, relative increase, which we saw in chapter 4. And we'll see that near the end of today. I mean, I was able to get through all of chapter 5 today, you know, with the other class. So I'm guessing that'll happen here. So I did email an outline of the notes, just letting you know. Okay. All right. So that said, let's get started. Okay. So these are just some terminology. This is just some words that are good to know, vocabulary. You know, going back to the bank example, the money you put in an account, right, that you start out with, that's what they call the principal. Or like with a loan, the initial amount you borrow, you know, at the very beginning, that's what we call the principal. It's basically the starting amount. That's what the principal is. The interest, as I said, what happens is with a bank account, a savings account, for instance, banks will calculate a percentage of that and add that percentage on to your balance. So you have more money in there, assuming you leave it in there a certain amount of time. That's what interest is, as we saw already. It's a percentage of the principal. That's probably the easiest definition I could think of. So it's just a percentage of the principal. And that's related to the APR, the annual percentage rate, APR. And really, it's the total interest you're going to pay in a year. That's the formal definition of it. For now, it's just going to be the percent we're going to work with, as you'll see. First, what we're going to look at is what's called simple interest. And this I put on top. I made it kind of bold. Well, not bold, but I made it like so that everyone can see it. You'll see what I mean when we do an example. But with simple interest, what's going to happen is the interest is calculated once in the beginning, and that amount is added on during each time period. And the total interest, which is the total amount of interest that's accumulated, that's what capital I is. P sub 0 is the principal, or the starting amount. R is the APR, which is basically for us our percentage. T is time. Okay? And then you can get the balance after that time, the amount of time, which for us generally will be in years. The balance in the account will be P sub 0 plus I, which is this. P sub 0 times 1 plus I times T. All I'm doing here is I'm replacing I with this, then factoring out P sub 0. And again, R is the APR, the annual percentage rate or the annual interest rate in decimal form. Essentially, that's used to calculate how much interest is accumulated each year. You'll see in the examples, but for simple interest, you use that to calculate the interest, and that's how much interest you get each year. That's what I mean up here. The same interest amount is same interest is added to the amount each year, as opposed to what we'll see as compound interest, where you calculate the interest, you recalculate it each year using APR, as you'll see. All right, so those are the formulas. Those are in the notes I sent, and they're in these notes as well. They're also in the book, of course. Okay. And T, again, for us is just time. It's how many years the money will be in the account, or how many years the loan is for that we get from a lender. Here's our first example. So let's say you borrow $1,000 from a friend. And, in writing or just in words through a handshake, I don't know, but you agree to repay it at 5% simple interest for 3 years. I mean, we could use those formulas, but I want to go through the calculations to show you what's really going on. So in year 1, right, your principal, which is $1,000, okay, that's how much you're borrowing initially. Then we use that APR, the annual percentage rate, or the annual interest rate as it's called, 5%. That's how much interest we use that to calculate the interest, right? Which is 5% of $1,000. And you multiply that to get $50. Okay, now we add that on, and our ending balance is $1,050. So again, the APR, that's what we use to calculate the interest, right, for a whole year. You're using that to calculate the total interest. But this is for 3 years, so what's going to happen is the ending balance becomes our starting balance, as you can see. We add on the same interest to the starting balance, which is $1,050. So now at the end of the second year, we get $1,100. And then year 3 is the same idea. This ending balance becomes this starting balance. As you can see, we add on the interest and we're left with this. So at the end of year 3, we owe our friend not only the $1,000, but we owe that friend interest as well. Okay? And this is what I was saying with simple interest. The interest that's calculated, it's only calculated once with the principal, and it's added on each year. That's what simple interest. And we use the APR to calculate that. If you went back to the definition, right? That's a total you use that to get the total interest in a year, to be paid in a year. But now we can use our formulas. I mean, we could go through the calculation like that every time, but we don't have to. We have these formulas. So for the total so P sub 0 here is 1,000. R, right, is 0.05. Capital I, okay, as you can see, is P0 times R times T. So it's 1,000 times 0.05 times 3. I know maybe these two should be switched in order, but again, you're multiplying, so it doesn't matter what order. We get $150. And if you notice, that's the total interest, right? If you add $50 to itself 3 times, over here, in other words, you get $150. Then to get the ending balance, or how much the balance at the end of 3 years, which for us is how much we owe our friend, we're using this formula. We're essentially adding interest to the principal. In other words, we have this. Okay. We have $1,000, right? Times 1 plus R times T. In other words, we have this. And in the end, we have $1,150. Wait, sorry, wrong way. But this is what we're using. Sorry, my brain like spaced out for a second. But this is what we're using here. P0 times 1 plus RT. So this is what we're using here. P0 times 1 plus R times T. Okay? All right. Essentially, again, we're adding P0 to I. So, but this is just mathematically the same thing. All right. Okay, let me just stop this. Let me stop the recording.